Okay, court cases. We haven't done very well in court. One case that we won was a group of creationists wanted to meet in a library. And the library director said, no, you cannot meet here. And they went to court, and the judge ruled that, and here's the judge, Lynn Alderman, well-known judge in Wisconsin, he ruled that basically the library cannot restrict speech about creationism in a public forum in a library. And he said that because, look, you allow communists, you allow this group, you allow that group, you allow every other group except creationists. You either allow no group or every group. You cannot discriminate on the basis of what they're going to talk about, unless what they're going to talk about is illegal. And he couldn't find any law that said it's illegal to talk about God as creator. So we won that case. So if you meet in a library and the librarian says, nope, sorry, you can't meet here, you can say, well, that's not what the courts ruled. Another case is the opposite. Moore versus Gaston Board of Education. Moore taught Darwinism theory was fact. Adam and Eve is false. There was no Adam and Eve. It's a myth. It's not true. There's no life after death. When you die, that's it. There's no heaven. There's no hell. Christianity is wrong, etc. And the court ruled he has a right to give students this information because students should hear all points of view. And there have been many cases, one in California recently, been many cases where the courts have ruled the same thing. You can teach atheism if you want to. You can teach against creationism. You cannot teach information in favor of the creation worldview. And to me, that's one-sided. To me, basically, the courts are basically prohibiting theism and allowing the teaching of atheism. And no wonder many people, if you read Ken Ham's latest book, where he talked about a lot of students leave the church, mentally at least, when they're in 5th or 6th grade. Well, does that surprise anyone? It shouldn't, because what do they teach in the schools? Not every school, not everywhere, but of course that's commonly taught. And I could give you many examples of lectures that I heard when I was evaluating other teachers at my school. For example, one teacher said, well, a bunch of molecules basically, and we're in a soup, and lightning struck, and these molecules formed amino acids, and the amino acids formed cells, and the cells got together and formed multicellular organisms, and multicellular organisms basically formed a worm-like creature. Worm-like creatures evolved into fish. Fish evolved into amphibians. Amphibians evolved into reptiles. Reptiles evolved into mammals. Mammals evolved into primates. And here we are. And that's where we came from. And the student said, is this all supported by science? And the teacher says, oh yeah, this has all been well documented. No question, this is proven from the goo to you by way of the zoo is all proven. It's fact. And that's what the teacher taught. And if you sit in the classrooms, you can see that's not unusual. But to say that the fossil record with turtles began with the turtle, which is clearly a turtle, you might have a problem, even though that's factually. So the courts have ruled consistently, you cannot teach there's life after death, you cannot teach God created us, or problems with the evolutionary theory. And when they do this, they say this is called teaching creationism in the back door. That's how they respond. So if you're teaching indeed that there are problems with evolution, this is teaching creationism in the back door, and therefore this is, they try to claim, is illegal. So we basically have a state-enforced religion. And one area I've had a lot of interest in for a number of years is the development of the Nazi movement. And I found in reading about how they achieved what they did it the same way that we are now progressing. They want to get God off the streets, God off the public square, and religion eventually off the public square, and eventually they wanted to close down the churches, and eventually they wanted to institute a Nazi state religion, which was basically paganism. Okay? And as you read how they did it, you can see, yeah, we've done that, we've done this, we've done that, we've done this. We're going along the same line that the Nazis did. Now, I'm not saying we're going, totally in the direction the Nazis did, but it's just eerie how similar it was, and how Darwinism was required teaching in the schools. They had to teach Darwinism in the schools by law in Nazi Germany. They could not teach creationism in the schools in Nazi Germany. And they also had to teach eugenics, which is what we fortunately haven't done. So what we have basically now is what Time magazine called evolution wars. And this is center of what we call the cultural war. So we're not talking about a minor issue. We're talking about a major issue. And as I stressed, people lost careers in my book, not for what they did, but who they are. In other words, thought crimes is what happened. And moving on. Many use articles from major science journals like Nature and Science, and they were told they couldn't do this. And that's because these articles, if you read them carefully, you understand that they produce doubts about Darwin. A good example is Gamaliel Gonzalez, and he believed the universe has purpose. They didn't even accuse him of teaching religion. In fact, they don't even know what religion he is. I don't even know. I thought he was Catholic, but somebody says, no, I don't think he's Catholic. I think he's something else. But we don't know what religion he is. But he wrote a book called The Privileged Planet, which was made into a film. And basically, he said the universe has purpose. And this was the end of his career. And in my book, I have a whole chapter on him. And I reproduce all the emails that were relevant to his case between faculty. And they said specifically, he says the universe has purpose. And we don't want someone like that teaching students at Iowa State University. And therefore, we want him out of there. Because the universe has no purpose. It has no meaning except the meaning we give to it. And this you might think is a minor factor among Darwinists. It's not minor. It's major. If you say, well, this evolved for a purpose, they'll be all over you. It did not evolve for a purpose. It evolved because of natural selection. And natural selection is not a purpose. Basically, it was more fit than another organism, therefore died off, therefore did not evolve for a purpose. It evolved because it had the traits that allowed it to be superior to its competitors, and therefore natural selection. They explain just about everything by natural selection, which, in a sense, if you're a biology student, just put down natural selection. That's a good answer to almost any question. And it's amazing how many things they can explain by natural selection. They explain, for example, sex by natural selection, which makes sense. They also explain homosexuality by natural selection, which does not seem to make sense. Okay, but they can explain it. How do they explain it? Well, homosexuals spend a lot of time with their relatives, and therefore their relatives have a survival advantage, and therefore their relatives are more likely to survive, and therefore the genes for homosexuality are more likely to survive. Therefore, homosexuality has a survival advantage, and that's why it's selected by evolution. And they can explain, why does aggressiveness, why does it exist? Well, because if I'm more aggressive, I'll kill you, and I'll get to eat, and I'll live, and I'll pass on my genes. Okay? But how about people who are loving and kind? Well, if I'm loving and kind, then we as a group are more likely to survive, and we'll pass on our genes. So they can explain everything by natural selection. Natural selection has become their God. And so that's why purpose is so important. If you say the universe has purpose, life has purpose, that is teaching against evolution, and many cannot deal with that. Roger DeHart, his case is also in my book, and he was forbidden from using articles in his classroom published by the National Association of Biology Teachers, Nature and Science. Unbelievable. And that's very clear in the information I have in my book. Labeling is a problem. If they don't like you, they just label you a creationist. And I like to bring out the fact that we're all creationists. Everyone is a creationist. The difference is who or what is the creator. Some creationists believe that intelligence, God, is the creator. Other creationists believe that mutations, copying errors, natural selection is the creator. We all are creationists. We just differ in who or what we believe did the creating. So you could say, all of us could say, well, we're all creationists. And Talk Origins especially, they are our website set up basically to attack people who doubt Darwin. And so, given that definition, creation is taught, if you think about it, everywhere. Besides that, creation directly is taught, but as long as you teach against it, you're okay. So you can teach against creation, and you're all right. If you teach for that worldview, you have a problem. Okay, so besides the fact we're all creationists, I can teach as much as I want to about creationism in my classroom, in my science classroom, as long as I'm trying to convince you it's not true, it's false. And I find that interesting. Okay, I mentioned this, all of us are creationists. And I guess I can skip a lot of this. And in conclusion, this basically amounts to indoctrination. We're indoctrinating students into a worldview. And a number of people that are part of the intelligent design movement are atheists. And I've asked a number, how can you be part of this movement and reject Darwinism and be an atheist? And they say, well, I know evolution didn't do it, but I don't know what did. I don't know how we got here. So people ask how we got here. I don't know. I don't believe God put us here. I don't believe evolution put us here. The best answer is I don't know. But some oppose Darwinism because they feel it's putting a straitjacket on science. At science, we should be open to all possible explanations. And they feel that if you criticize Darwinism, even if you're a committed Darwinist, you could end up in trouble. There's two researchers that just wrote a book. I think Darwin Was Wrong is the title. And they stress, I'm an atheist, I don't believe in God, I'm not Jewish, I'm not a Christian, I'm an atheist, I'm a Darwinist, but I think relative to this aspect, Darwin was wrong. He was wrong about natural selection. That natural selection does not have any creative power. Well, not unexpectedly, these professors, even though they're atheists, and they say they are, right in the front, we're atheists, we don't believe in God, we don't support intelligent design, we don't support creationism, but I think Darwin was wrong about natural selection. They have been viciously attacked in all the scientific journals. I have yet to read one review of their book which is positive. They're all negative. Because if you question Darwinism, any aspect of it, you could end up having a problem. And these were two well-known leading academics in their field. And yet they were criticized. So there are some people that are part of the ID movement feel that Darwinism is wrong, but one thing they really have a problem with is the dictatorial. The we're right, and if you disagree with us, well, that's the end of your career. That science has become almost a monolithic dictatorship. And the science establishment dictates what is correct. This has also been a problem with global warming now. And I've heard a number of articles where professors have been fired, not given tenure, denied degrees. Same thing because they're, quote, global warming deniers. In fact, there's one from Colorado, Dr. Deming, I believe, who teaches at some school here, who's actually well-known, published lots of books and journals and so on, and he does not go along with global warming, and he emailed me not too long ago and said, you know, they've really put my career through hell. Even though, as far as all my other science is concerned, it's orthodox. So if you teach evidence against ID, well, that's okay, that's science. If you teach evidence for ID, got a problem. You got a big problem. I defined evolution at the beginning, and I want to stress that it's rarely defined. They'll say over and over and over, evolution, evolution, evolution. They never define it, so you don't really know what they're talking about. And that's one thing, and that's really important, because when you use terms like evolution, you need to define what you're talking about. And that's one thing they stress, by the way, in science. Always define your terms. It's really important. And, of course, that's not done. And the problem clearly is not survival of the fittest. I mean, obviously, if you're more fit, you're more apt to survive, right? I mean, that's like saying rich men have a lot of money. Well, of course. You call them rich, of course they have a lot of money. Okay, survival of the fittest are more likely to survive because they're more fit. Well, of course. You know, that's obvious. The problem has always been, from Darwin's day to today, the problem has always been the arrival of the fittest. Where does the fittest come from? And that still is a lethal problem for Darwinism. They've tried every explanation under the sun. Gemules, Darwin proposed that, and that's been proven wrong. Pangenesis has been proven wrong. Orthogenesis has been proven wrong. Lamarckianism has been proven wrong. All the theories they proposed to explain the arrival of the fittest have been shown to be wrong, including mutations, but nothing's left. Mutations are clearly wrong as a theory because they're not producing the evolution upwards, the ascent of man. They're producing what Darwin said in his 1871 book, the descent of man. So Darwin was right about that. Man is descending, which is another talk, so I won't go into that now. But they don't have an explanation as to where this information comes from, to go from, in this case, from fish to man. Censorship hurts science. And I think even if I wasn't a creationist, even if I was an atheist, knowing what I know now, I would say, look, the censorship has got to stop. Science has to be an open field that we allow all ideas and we test them by the evidence. It has to be such because the truth will come out eventually. And in this area as well, I think the truth will come out eventually. It will just, and evolutionists will discover it, as they are now. The truth will come out eventually. And creationists are utilizing this truth that Darwinists discover. Often they criticize us because they're saying, well, you're just utilizing the stuff that Darwinists have discovered. Yes, we are. Because it supports what we're saying. And because it's been shown to be true by science. And that's why I like to call these Darwin fundamentalists or dogmatic Darwin fundamentalists, because that's what many indeed are. And I love to talk about this, as should be pretty obvious. And I like to talk about this not just with those who agree, but with those who disagree. But I found it so difficult. It's really difficult. When I point out some of the same stuff I pointed out to you, people either walk away or don't want to talk to me anymore, or I get a barrage of words I've never heard of. They call profanity. And I've learned a few profane words from these people. And if you look on the website, there's stuff about me, and invariably they have to come up with profanity, or what I call scatological language. And I guess it's just been hard for me to get used to well-educated PhDs who resort to language that would embarrass a sailor, a drunken sailor. I just have not been able to get used to that. I debated P.Z. Myers not too long ago in Minnesota, and we really pressured him to sign an agreement that he would not use scatological language, that he would be civil. And he wouldn't sign it. But right before the debate, we said, look, this is not going to occur unless you sign this. So he finally signed it at the debate that he would be civil. Okay, and he was civil at the debate, I admit. But after the debate was over, on his website, especially his followers came up with all kinds of obscene comments about me and what I had to say. And I just, if what I have to say is wrong, then just critique what I have to say. Don't attack me. And what they do is, I'm sure you've experienced, is they attack the person. When I worked for the court, we often said, if you have a good case, you present the facts. Okay? You attack the facts. If you don't have the facts, you attack the person. If you can't attack the person, bang on the table. You attack the table. And I found in this case it's true. One case I testified in Maryland, I was on the stand and the guy had a folder this thick and my name was on it. And I thought, oh my, what does he have? And he started with allegations about me when I was a teenager. Contacted an old girlfriend, which we broke up, and I guess she didn't like it. Shakespeare said, hell hath no fury, but a woman scorned. So when you break up with a girl, she may not say nice things about you in the future. So they contacted all these people, and the judge right away said, I will not have that in my courtroom. You attack the case, not the person. And he basically, one question, closed up his folder, and sat down. His whole case was to attack me. I was an expert witness in the case. The whole case was to attack me. And I see this routinely when I talk about this issue. They invariably attack me and not the case. Why? Because, well, they can't. They can't attack my case. And if they could, fine, then if I'm wrong, then I'll stop saying things that are not true. It will take longer, but evolutionists will eventually disprove their own theory. And unfortunately, by and large, we're excluded from science, at least academic science, and we're excluded from grants. We've failed totally to get grants. One university just got $26 million of your tax-paying money to prove evolution. $26 million to prove evolution. I thought it was already proved. Why do you need to give them $26 million to prove something which is already proved? Yeah. Do you think we could get I could get 26 million? I doubt it. I doubt it very much. Okay, what can we do? This is what I recommend. And evidently there is, because I've given this presentation a couple of times already here, and a lot of us see this as feasible. All we need to do is get an academic freedom bill. Now, Louisiana, the legislature passed it. In this state, all we have to do is get, I'm told, about 63,000 signatures. It'll be on the ballot. We vote, and it will be a constitutional amendment. It'll be part of the Colorado Constitution. What do we want? We want the freedom to critique Darwinism, the freedom to present both sides of controversial issues. And Louisiana has it as a law. I don't think we'll get it to the legislature here because there's too much opposition. But I strongly feel the voters would basically, I bet we get 70, 80% would pass this bill, which would allow teachers at all levels to critique, to cover controversial issues like Darwinism, and we could probably list a couple of others. That it's not controversial, they're controversial. And it would pass, and that would, by and large, if we ended up in court, we'd say, look, the Constitution gives us the right to critique Darwinism. If that was the case, none of the cases I have in my book would be in there because that's all they were doing. That's all they were doing. I think most of us agree it's not a good idea to teach religion in science class. If you had a Buddhist teacher, you probably would not want that teacher to teach Buddhism, at least to try to indoctrinate in your students, your kids, into Buddhism. So most of us agree that probably the school should be neutral about religion. And so I would guess most of you do not feel it's a good idea that we sit in a science classroom and lecture about religion. Okay? And that's not what most creationists I know want to do. They want to objectively evaluate Darwinism, and at this point we don't have that freedom. And this would give us that freedom. And so hopefully in Colorado that'll happen. My guess is if it happens here, it'll be a domino effect and it'll happen throughout all the states. And in the long run, the scientists will see that's good. As it's been said, they went after the Jews and I wasn't a Jew, so I didn't help them. They went after the communists and I wasn't a communist and I didn't help them, so I wasn't worried about it. They went after the Catholics and I wasn't a Catholic, and so I didn't help them. And then they came after me, but there was no one left to defend me, and so therefore I lost. So a lot of people will be in favor of this because we're not the only ones that have these concerns. There are a lot of people that have these concerns. Science is really becoming a dictatorship, and that must be broken. Any questions or comments on that? Go ahead.
Yeah, the peer review issue is where it really gets screwed up. You hear people say, well, is there peer review? Well, the process is flawed. You can't get through the peer review because everybody on the board agrees with the fundamental.
Yeah, that's a major problem, although you can get by it sometimes. But what happens is you get by the peer review and they publish the articles, and then the journal gets hundreds of letters saying we're going to cancel your journal. And therefore there's pressure among the scientific community not to publish articles in favor of intelligent design. I just got 3 articles accepted through the peer review system, but 2 of them didn't touch on creationism. So that's where the problem is. But you're right, that's true. Basically, peer review is a problem. And there's a lot of criticism of peer review because often people who peer review your article know less about the subject than you do. After all, you wrote the article. You're the expert. And so how could these people, and this, you notice this among not just us, but you notice this among a lot of other people, because they'll write an article that's pioneering, nobody else has done the work, and then peer reviewers will review it, and you know they don't know what they're talking about. Is that true?
Oh, yeah.
You know they don't know what they're talking about. And so that is, and I've peer-reviewed a lot of articles, and at times I realize the author of the article knows much more than I do, and so I really can't fairly peer-review this. But I think when you're a peer reviewer, you like to be like a policeman. You like to, okay, you guys sit in the corner and you do as I say. And they like to be authoritative and tell other people what to do. And you have this ego which comes up when you're a peer reviewer, and I think that can get in the way of effectively evaluating the article. But that's a good point. Any other questions?
How does Darwinism, dogmatic Darwinism, damage research?
I'll give you lots of examples. I'll give you one of my favorite examples, and that is Darwin has said for a long time that the appendix doesn't have any function, and except to help surgeons buy a new Mercedes. And so, therefore, I don't know about Colorado, but many states had laws which said if you do abdominal surgery, you got to clip out the appendix. My wife, when she gave birth to one of our children, they did it cesarean, and the doctor said, "Oh, by the way, while I was in there, I took out your appendix." Now we realize the appendix has at least 5 different functions. Part of the immune system. It also stores commensal bacteria, which is important in order for us to have proper intestinal health for a number of reasons. And now we realize, in fact, there's some indications that people are more likely to develop colorectal cancer when they've had an appendectomy. And so, and I could go on with many of the other examples. Another example, which many evolutionists admit, was the idea of labeling non-coding DNA junk DNA. And now they realize that's a big problem, because we realize, as one person said, there's gold in that junk. Yeah. And there is, because now we're realizing that much of it, if not most of it, and I think the vast majority, has a very important function: regulation, control, repair. Genes are turned on and off for various reasons. Backup, a lot of reasons which we're just now beginning to get into. And so a lot of people realize that labeling this junk DNA was a mistake. And that was a major argument for evolution. Junk DNA. Why would God make us with 2% of our genes were functional and 98% were junk? No God would create an organism with 98% junk in the genome. And now we realize that, well, that's not true. And so therefore, this is one area where many evolutionists recognize it has hindered them. Primarily, evolutionists is a set of blinders. And some people feel creationists can do a better job, because creationists basically say, well, it could be created, it could be a result of natural causes. All options are open to a creationist. But to an evolutionist, only one option is open. It is there, it exists because of evolution. And that, I think, is a big problem. By the way, in the medical field, evolution just doesn't enter. I think we recognize it. We rarely said things like, well, God made it. But I remember often in doing the research in the area of genetics that we would say things like, well, it's got to be there for a purpose. Let's figure out what it does. Okay, why are these base pairs there? Well, they're there for a purpose. We just need to find out what they're there for. And so the assumption was things were well designed. And with that assumption, then, we carried forth our research. So in many ways, we really used a creationist interpretation, although nobody said that I remember. Although one professor said this, which some things they say you never forget. And he said, this is one, my A&P professor for gross anatomy, where we do dissections of corpses and so on. He said, about the hyoid bone, which is of all things, he said, whoever designed this really knew what they were doing. Of the hyoid bone. And the hyoid bone is not exactly the most complex structure in the body.
What is it?
But it's a bone our tongue is connected to, and it's kind of a U-shaped bone, and the muscle and tendons are able to slide across it, and that allows us, our tongue, to achieve stability and yet to move our jaw up and down. And he went through a lot of detail. I'm just going through a couple of sentences, but he went through a lot of detail and said, this is just amazing how this works. And most of us just assume the hyoid bone, big deal. It's a curved bone. It doesn't do much. It just sits there and kind of puts things in place. But he said, whoever designed this sure knew what they were doing. And I remember Probably I remember the whole lecture about the hyoid bone because of that statement. Other?
Dr. Bergman said evolution did not occur and could not occur.
Right.
Would you give us your top 5 evidences that you base that?
The main reason is, and I could give, well, a bunch of them, the fossil record, not there. And we have a pretty complete fossil record. We have, some people assume we have, a few fossils. We have billions of fossils. When I take my students on fossil expeditions, we'll come home with trunk loads of fossils. Fossils are not rare at all. You can go to fossil shows and buy beautiful fossils for 50 cents. There are an enormous number of fossils. Museums have so many fossils that it'll take hundreds of years to catalog them. And so that's why they're not too anxious to find more, because, hey, look, we've got storage bin after storage bin. Some movies occasionally they'll show you this. They'll open up these drawers and they'll say, we've got to catalog these and these and these. Now, you'll see an aisle which looks like it's 100 feet long, and we've got, 185,000 fossils we have yet to study and catalog and so on. So there's a lot of fossils we have yet to catalog. So it's pretty clear from the fossils we've discovered that we're not going to find any evidence of transitional forms. Every now and then we find a new variety of animal, which of course makes a lot of headlines and a lot of hullabaloo, but by and large you're not going to find anything radical. By and large, 99.999% of the fossils, you'll find them and say, yeah, that's a crinoid, and yeah, that's a trilobite, and that's a, you can recognize most of them pretty easily because you find a lot more of the same. So the fossil record is one thing. The main thing is the mutations. Study mutations quite a bit. That's a major area of focus. That's what I did a lot of my work at the medical school on, is mutations. And it's very clear that mutations produce degeneration of the genome. In fact, I have a whole lecture on this, and I point out that many mutations are what they call near neutral. They're not lethal, but they accumulate and they cause aging. And people age and species age. And we get old and species get old, and they now believe that's a major reason for extinction is species get old because mutations accumulate. And the problem are not the lethal mutations, because they die and that's the end for many lethal mutations. The problem are the non-lethal, the near neutral, which accumulate. And as time goes on, we get more and more near neutral mutations, and the mutational load is building up, and therefore we have more and more diseases that are caused by mutations. And now there's probably about 8,000 or 9,000 diseases that are caused by mutations, which many of them were never known in history. And so the mutational load is increasing, which is eventually going to cause mutational meltdown, and that's well recognized in medicine, because that's a major goal of medical research, is to try to prevent that mutational meltdown. And that's why they're working on dealing with all these diseases. Autism is one of the main ones they're looking at. Could be a result of accumulation of mutations. So they're looking seriously at mutations as being the problem. Why didn't it occur in the past? Because we didn't have the mutational load buildup that we have now. And that's the main reason, because there's no way you can go from goo to us. No known mechanism that'll produce it. And I tell my students, if you come up with a mechanism, you tell me about it, we'll write a paper, and we'll both become famous. We'll get a Nobel Prize, we'll share it, I'll get $500,000, you'll get $500,000, we'll be world famous, and our names will be in the textbooks. But, there's no way they'll come up with, from what we know, with a mechanism that will go against the fact that mutational load is increasing. And that's well recognized. There's tons of literature which document that, and they recognize it. It's in my biochemistry book. How they say it in my biochemistry book is each child is born with a larger number of mutations than their parents. You have more than your parents, your kids will have more than you. So the mutation load is increasing each generation. And so it's very clear in the biochemistry books back here.
There was an article in some paper recently, a synthetic cell that was built.
Yeah, Craig, Venture. No, all he did is, it's kind of like an organ transplant. He basically took a cell and took the code of the genome with about 4,000 genes. It was a bacteria. It was, I think, a pathogenic bacteria. I'm not sure, mycoplasma, I think. But anyways, they took the code and then they synthesized, taking the code, which is called plagiarism. They copied the code and then they synthesized the DNA code and they put it inside of the bacteria, and the bacteria was able to do things that bacteria do. And so, no, this just shows how complex it is, and doesn't really help their case at all. Although the headlines were misleading, life created in the test tube, and so on, and that's just irresponsible. And scientists recognized it was irresponsible, and right away they said, look, this is not life created in the test tube. This is misleading. We as scientists are losing credibility by making statements like this. Explain what we did and leave it there. Don't start making these grandiose claims that we made in life in a test tube and we're creating life and we're almost God, etc. We're not. We plagiarized the genome. We stuck it into a bacteria. That's all we did. It's like an artificial heart. Not much more.
So would that not be something that we could use as an argument that 15 years and $40 million that could barely replicate?
Yeah, that's...
Having that occur by accident seems to be a long shot.
Yeah, let's do it by accident. That'll be a lot more support for them. And of course, they're not doing that. They're doing that by, 30 years and $40 million and very sophisticated sequencing machines, which got the sequence, and then we use very sophisticated machines to replicate that sequence. And you can buy, when we worked at the medical school, we bought these. You tell them what you want. You want A, T, G, 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 C, T, T. And you write it down. It's $1 a base pair plus $50 charged, so you have 20 base pairs. You send them a check for $70, and they send you, A, T, T, G, 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 and so on, whatever you want. And so that's all they did. So, but it's quite a feat. I mean, it's not that small, but nonetheless, it wasn't creation of life.
You've written several papers and books, and I've seen some of your degrees you've gotten since you were terminated from Bowling Green. Have you had troubles with getting things published?
Oh yeah, everywhere. Yeah, everywhere. The medical school seems to. They seem to. Well, my students like me, so they don't. My boss there is supportive, I think, somewhat. In medical school, they are. The Northwest State, where I also teach, oh yeah, they constantly have in trouble. They're constantly trying to find things that are, but they haven't found anything yet, but they're looking. So yeah, it's a hassle. You have to spend a lot of time defending their false charges, so that's a hassle. But we have a union, so we have NEA. And so NEA makes sure they try to follow the rules, and that's the only reason why I'm still there. If we didn't have the NEA, I wouldn't be there either. With 9 degrees, they don't care. So you're Darwin, and you can't do that. Question?
2 states that already have a solution.
1, Louisiana.
Louisiana and Texas.
Texas? Oh yeah, Texas, yeah. I don't...
My question is anybody looking at what they did to get this into place to replicate that across our 50 states?
Yeah, I know what they did. I was involved in the Louisiana thing.
Okay. Does anybody in Colorado do it?
They take the exact same bill, and it's never even gotten out of committee in all the other states. There's too much antagonism.
And given the way our legislature is constituted at the present time, there's no way that can be across.
Yeah. We are a democracy. We the people need to be making some of these decisions. We can't leave it to the legislature.
So what's your solution? You say good men and good women do nothing. So what do we do besides pray?
Well, I'm hoping that we can get this list together, and if we get 65,000 names, and I'm told that's not too hard, because we've, how many churches do we have? And we can easily get 65,000 names, and it's on the ballot, and then the people vote, and you've got it. You're done.
You better have 3 or 4 times that many because they'll be challenged.
Yeah, that's what I understand too, but they'll challenge it. But you got to make sure that only registered voters, and you have to make sure the name is the same on your voter registration. If you have Michael M. Taylor, and then you sign the petition, Michael Taylor, they'll throw it off. So yeah, you got to really make sure because they'll want to throw it out. But if you do it right, you should be okay.
In regard to these bills that passed in Louisiana and Texas, granted they have these bills, but my question is, have these bills actually caused both Louisiana and Texas to be places where there
it's a good point. The problem is, in spite of these bills, teachers are afraid to critique Darwinism. But what we need, though, is that get some brave teacher, and there's always a few brave people out there, get a brave teacher to critique Darwinism, go to court, and the court will say, look, this is what the Constitution says. We have no choice but to allow what you did to occur. And then once you get 2 or 3 court cases, teachers will realize they have the freedom to critique Darwinism, and then my guess is it will become more common. Part of the problem, too, I'm told, is that teachers don't know how to critique Darwinism because they've learned only one thing in school, and that's evolution. They've never heard the other side. So therefore, they really can't really do it effectively. But that's an area where we could play a role. We could have seminars for teachers on how to critique Darwinism. We could produce books which will help teachers critique Darwinism in the classroom appropriately. So we could have a very important role in that whole important aspect of allowing teachers to do that.
Would you mind if I make just a quick comment?
Sure, go ahead.
I agree with everything you said. This is wonderful what you've been saying. But I want to make a comment about that one ingredient that we absolutely have to have, that without which every effort will fail, and that is faith in God. And if we don't operate in an active, real faith in Him, knowing that when we go forward with these bills and with whatever teaching we're going to do in regard to the creation issue, if we don't go forward with that faith, it's not going to happen.
Yeah, oh yeah.
We're up against the spiritual forces of darkness, and the only thing that overcomes them is the power of God. And in regard to that, I highly recommend reading the book of the chapter of faith, Hebrews 11.
Yeah.
Because it really hammers that point home.
Yeah, it does. That's excellent advice. I find faith is often not translated into behavior. And Hebrews 11, of course, stresses that, as well as James and a few other scriptures. We have the faith, we need to exercise that faith. And a problem often is we've got all the stuff, we've got the heart, we've got the faith, but it's hard to translate that into behavior. And that's the problem when I present this. People have is, look, I've got the faith, but I need to translate it into behavior. Yeah, but that's a problem, and that's a problem we have to deal with. And that's why I'm going around the country presenting this information, because hopefully it will be dealt with appropriately. Any other comments?
I don't have a question, but I want to thank you for mentioning your talk here today, because I live in Connecticut, and Dr. Jerry Bergman mentioned not only his book, which I did buy a copy several months ago when I found out, but he particularly mentioned that he's speaking here, and I was going to attend a conference in Boulder. So I rented a car and I came to listen to your talk. And as my personal token of appreciation for telling me about this meeting, as well as your presentation, which you did an excellent job, I want to give you a little token of my appreciation.
Oh, okay.
Which I hope you will enjoy.
Well, thank you.
And to tell you also how much I appreciate your work, I wrote an article in which I cite your book as a reference. So if you get an inquiry about the slaughter of the dissidents, then you would know in the context in which they got the inquiry to you.
Okay, well, good.
Because I don't want you to be surprised by things. And while I'm at it, I want to give you a couple more presents.
Okay.
And one of them is this pocket knife.
Okay.
And
that will be useful. When I talk to evolutionists, you'd say, "No, wait, be nice now."
and here's a 1 gig.
Oh, that's always useful. Yeah.
With a copy of that paper and some other stuff on it. Because I wrote several papers, so I thought you might appreciate and keep that in mind.
I do.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. Oh, one more thing you could do is buy my book and give a copy to your senator, your congressman, people who may be able to help, to libraries. I have a number of people who bought my book and they've given it to libraries. That's very helpful because once the word gets out, I'm finding I get support from all kinds of people. And Jews and Muslims as well. In fact, I have a whole chapter I'm working on which deals with Jews who are concerned about this very problem. And so it is growing in support. One more question?
There's one issue with libraries is I tried to give library creation books and they will refuse them.
Yeah, what you can do is give it to them and tell them if they don't put it in the library, you'd like it back. And so they, and also there's 38 reviews on Amazon. Give them the reviews with the book. And I found about half accepted. And so, but I always say, if here's a copy, if you don't want it, here's my card. Please give me a call. If you don't put it in the library, I'd like it back. And then you can give it to somebody else. So I think when you do that, they take it more seriously, and they're more apt to put it in. At least that's my experience. I found local libraries, every local library put the book in because I'm a local guy. So I went to 12 libraries in the area, and every single one of them put it in. And so that helps. If you're local, or if you say, I live here, I'm local, and I'd like you to put this book in, they're more apt to do that. If I go there and put it in, they'll say, where are you from? Ohio. Oh, we don't put books in by people written from Ohio. And they don't say that, but they're less apt to put it in. So, and especially college, university libraries, it's important to have it in.
Do you have the wording for the legislation?
Just go to the Louisiana website in the legislature, and it's paragraph. How?
Versus Agnew?
Pardon?
The court case?
The Louisiana, the law that was passed by the legislature.
Balanced treatment.
The balanced treatment.
Balanced treatment.
Right.
Because I worked with personhood, and that's the pro-life amendment that's on the ballot here. We've done that 2 election cycles in a row, collecting signatures from across the state. And the problem that we had is churches aren't all that supportive. Even though they may say that they're pro-life or that sort of thing, they don't want to get involved in politics. So I would imagine that this would run into the same bit of opposition. But it certainly is possible.
Some.
It's a lot of effort, but it's possible.
But I was a Methodist for 20-some years. Methodist Church is one of the most